Prime Minister Narendra Modi is exhorting citizens to light candles come Sunday. Is this a masterful exercise in mass mobilization, or is this just showmanship by what the Congress is calling a photo opportunity Prime Minister? Joining us on the Newstrack, representing the Bharatiya Janata Party, Panda, representing the Congress Party, its most articulate spokesperson, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Panda, I want to start this debate with you. Explain to everyone who's watching why you think that this whole idea of lighting candles at 9 p.m. on Sunday is something which serves any purpose. Because you've got a lot of people, they're sitting at home, they don't have much to do, but why bring them together? The opposition calls this a tamasha by a photo opportunity Prime Minister. Panda.
I think it's very unfortunate that the opposition is seeking to make politics out of this and is calling it a photo op and theatrics. Let me make a very important point here. Unlike in authoritarian countries where they can simply clamp down, democracies require communication. It requires the leadership to reach out to the people and convince them. And especially a democracy like India, which is the world's largest and most diverse, we have 1.3 billion argumentative Indians. And without convincing them, without carrying them, not everybody will comply. As it is, we are seeing small groups of people not complying with public health guidelines, and that creates a lot of problems. So it is very, very crucial, and which is why when the Prime Minister started with the Janata curfew and reached out, that was an exercise, one, to celebrate our frontline workers, the doctors, the nurses, the medical and essential services people. But also while celebrating them, it had another purpose, which was to bring people together, to provide a sense that this is a national imperative that we must all contribute to. And now we are midway through this, almost midway through this 21-day lockdown. And it was also important for what the Prime Minister did today in his video message to reach out, to address the concerns that people have. People have been cooped up. They're lonely, they have concerns, and that's normal because we are not used to being confined for such long times. And to ask them again to come together on Sunday night, on April 5th, to light candles is another motivational exercise to make everybody recognize that we are all in this together. Now, these motivational exercises are crucial and they go hand in hand with many other hard decisions that the government is taking. And for that, you know, everybody around the world is complimenting the preemptive steps that the Indian government took and continues to take, starting with shutting down flights from China back in early January, starting with the steps that are being taken now to ensure that all resources are fully mobilized to contain this pandemic. So it must go hand in hand. The enforcement of the lockdown and social distancing must go hand in hand with motivational communications by the leadership.
Dr. Tharoor, the BJP says, look at the entire suite of actions. The Janata curfew set the stage for the national lockdown. The 9 minute, 9 baje creates a sense of shared collective purpose, and therefore it brings the country together. And therefore, the BJP is hoping that even you will be joining this exercise come Sunday night.
Oh yeah, no, I'll light a lamp. That's not a problem. The issue is not that. I agree with my friend Jay that democracies require communication. In every other democracy, the president, the prime minister is out there communicating every day to the nation what tangibly is being done about COVID and about fighting this terrible virus. We expected the prime minister to do the same thing at some point, even if halfway through this lockdown, to tell people what are we doing to ensure that our doctors get personal protective equipment. What are we doing to ensure that our nurses and staff and doctors in some hospitals aren't running greater risk of infection because of our government's inability to provide these basic things? What are we doing to import, manufacture, distribute whatever more ventilators into the ICUs? What are we doing to ensure rapid testing for people so that we can follow the WHO mantra of test, trace, isolate, treat? What are we doing at the same time about the consequences of the lockdown? The nation has seen the unplanned disaster that befell the migrant workers. What is the government going to do in future to ensure that it thinks through the consequences of its decisions? What are the factors that the Prime Minister is weighing in his mind now? What the daily wage workers? Are they going to get money in their Jan Dhan accounts? Is the PM Kisan amount going to be doubled or even more to 7,500 rupees, as we suggested? What's happening to pensioners? What's happening to the Manrega workers who have not been paid for months? What's happening to the state governments who want their GST dues paid by the central government? What about business people? How are they going to be able to cope? Will there be tax relief or other forms of relief, interest waivers? These are the questions uppermost on the minds of people. Motivation is all very well. We're motivated. By and large, people have been observing the government's lockdown. There have been exceptions, and those have been reflective of failures of communication by the government. But where are the substantive issues? Is the Prime Minister going to take the nation into confidence as to what considerations will weigh in his mind as we get to the end of the 21 days? Is he going to tell the nation, I have to consider this, but I have to weigh it against that? I have to see, for example, whether we should have a staggered lifting of the lockdown, whether we need to extend the lockdown. What are the considerations? Why leave the people in the dark? This is the behavior of an autocracy. It is not the behavior of a democracy. In a democracy, you do communicate with people. In a democracy, you tell the people what they desire to know, what they need to know for their own safety, their own security, their own well-being. I light a lamp, but it's not going to keep me any safer, and nor is it going to illuminate very much of the thinking of the Prime Minister.
Jai Panda, Dr. Tharoor using strong words to accuse the BJP government of acting in an autocratic fashion, saying energies should be focused more on better implementation of the national lockdown rather than symbolic actions. States are desperate for funds. The Congress says try and fix that part of the problem rather than resorting to showmanship. Jai Panda.
The Congress is resorting to politics, and I'm disappointed that my friend Shashi Tharoor thinks that symbolism is not important, because as I explained earlier, it is important to bind us all together as one nation. As you are aware, Rahul, there are still instances of groups of people who are not only not willing to abide by public health guidelines, but are actively concealing themselves and even attacking frontline workers like doctors and essential services personnel. So this effort to keep us all together as one nation with a single objective of fighting this pandemic is extremely important. But let me point out, it's not for no reason that the World Health Organization and other international bodies are felicitating India, are complimenting India for the actions taken. You know, India today, because of the actions taken over the past few weeks, has more than 1.5 lakh hospital beds dedicated for COVID patients. It has 258 hospitals dedicated for COVID patients. It has more than 1 lakh ICU beds. Now, regarding ventilators, this is a concern around the world. India has taken proactive steps. There is a company in Rajkot which has started producing 40 ventilators a day. There are other contributions from DRDO and the Indian Navy in terms of innovations, which it would take just too long to explain. But let me say this. Those of us in my party have been working night and day. Millions of BJP Karyakartas have been volunteering with the permission of local administrations to provide food to the most needy, such as migrant workers. Now, when Shashi said that it was unplanned, it was completely wrong, because migrant workers have been tended to throughout the country. It is only in a couple of states where they did not get the confidence that where they stayed, they would be provided with food and medicines, that there was a scare and people started trekking home. Now, fortunately, because of interventions by both the union government and by many state governments, that confidence has been built. And by and large, that issue has diminished quite a lot. So it's unfair to keep talking about problems which are getting solved as if it is some kind of a catastrophe. Now, let me point something else out. The reality is that the vast majority of Indians have faith in Prime Minister Modi and his leadership in handling this crisis. Just a couple of days ago, a major national newspaper reported that 83% of Indians have confidence that Modi ji is doing the right thing and will tackle the problem properly. And to try to make politics out of this on such a situation, I don't think is going to be appreciated by people. I urge my friends in the Congress, most of all Shashi, to be much more temperate and not be so cynical about lighting a lamp. It serves a very important purpose to keep us all focused on this issue as one team, as one nation.
Dr. Tharoor, would you concede that Prime Minister Modi has actually done quite a remarkable job of mobilizing the national administrative machinery in a manner that other governments would have struggled? If you look back at the functioning of previous governments, compare that with, yes, there have been niggles, there have been lots of rollout problems, but by and large, he's been able to get the machinery to rally around him, and he's been able to mobilize citizens. You understand mass psyche so well. He's been able to get a majority of the citizens to mobilize in a manner that any other past leader would have struggled to.
Well, I'm not sure that's true, because we do know about the preparations that were undertaken by the Manmohan Singh government during the threat of the Ebola virus, which didn't actually materialize in the end. But testing kits were arranged, hospital beds were prepared, everything very quietly without any tali bajawing or candle lighting. But let me say, I'll take Jay at his word that all these preparations have been done. I'll take you at your word that Mr. Modi has been active in mobilizing the government. Why didn't we hear this from the Prime Minister? What I'm saying is, it's the job of the Prime Minister in a democracy to tell the people, to reassure the people, look, we've taken these actions, we've got these beds ready, we have ordered these protective kits. We are reading in the newspapers, as you know, that some doctors are threatening to resign because they fear they will be infected in the absence of adequate masks, gowns, gloves, and other protective equipment. We want to hear from the Prime Minister that he understands the problems and he has addressed them. He gave us nothing. He only gave us the motivation and the symbolism. As I said, we'll go along with that, but that's not enough. It is not enough because the country needs and expects more from a Prime Minister. It expects from a Prime Minister that he will take the nation into confidence, tell the nation what's going on, address their legitimate fears. Jay hasn't even addressed the entire question of the financial anxieties of the public. We've got to come up with some very practical suggestions. Our former Prime Minister, former Finance Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, has explained very clearly that the money can be found for the very specific suggestions we have made, including 7,500 rupees in the Jan Dhan accounts, the PM Kisan Yojana and the pension funds. The fact is, the practical solutions that the government could implement were missing from the first financial package. We hope it was only a first one that was announced by Mr. Sitharaman. And so we have said there should be a second package urgently because people are deeply worried. Don't forget there are places closing down for lack of liquidity. There are daily wagers who don't know where their next meal is coming from for lack of a daily wage. There are serious issues facing our country. We are all behind the lockdown. We're all behind what needs to be done. When Jay says, of course, there was planning, I'm sorry, we had a 48-hour notice for the Janta curfew on a Sunday, and we had only 4 hours notice for a 21-day lockdown. Can you imagine if the government had given, let's say, 4 days notice, saying that in 4 days planes and buses and trains would be shut down? Those of you who have to go somewhere, go home, go now. Those of you who need assurances for food, tell us. Employers, here are your instructions. Make your plans and arrangements. Make sure you shelter your workers, you don't fire them. Whatever it may be, the whole set of instructions should have been given. That's what planning and foresight is all about. You don't do things at 4 hours notice the way you demonetize the country at 3 hours notice and paralyze the economy and hurt so many individuals for so many weeks and months. That's not the way in which a democratic government should be functioning. The flair for the theatrical, the flair for the dramatic gesture is wonderful showmanship. It doesn't actually communicate in a democracy what people are entitled to know from a serious Prime Minister treating them as adults. Where is the Prime Minister chosen to take any opposition party into confidence? Where is he called on the people to say, this is why I need your trust, this is what I've done, and this is what I'll be doing? So these are all questions to which I'm sorry we were left without answers today.
Before I go to Jai Panda, you're coughing a bit. I hope you're doing okay. Nowadays,
well,
the moment somebody coughs, my heart skips a beat. So I hope you're okay, and that's most important. We'll continue the debate. That's not a big issue. I hope you're okay.
I'm fine. Thanks, Rahul. I'm fine.
Jai Panda, respond to the specific charge that the Prime Minister is not getting into details. How many personal protective equipment kits are being bought? How many tests will be done? What's being done about finances? The states need money. The Congress says he's guilty of theatrics and showmanship. He's not treating citizens as adults. He's treating them as toys, as kids, giving them something to stay busy with.
I recall the words of my late friend Shri Arun Jaitley, who used to point out that the Congress and Shashi's party is determined to find a problem in every solution. The reality is the Prime Minister is working 15 to 20 hours every day, as are his senior ministers in the cabinet, including the Home Minister. And the Prime Minister is not just communicating to build team spirit and to keep everybody focused on the goal of getting through this lockdown. He's also having video conferences across the country with chief ministers, with top administrators, chief secretaries. He's been having video conferences with major social influencers, like today he did with major sports personalities. So it's not just communications. I gave you the examples of the hospital beds and other arrangements that have been made. Now remember something, if you want to nitpick, you can find an excuse to nitpick about anything. Now Singapore, which is a small country and tried to get away by not having a lockdown all these weeks, but enforcing strict social isolation, has today announced a strict lockdown for 1 month. So the lockdown, when it was announced, was well timed. Any earlier, it would have done much more damage to the economy and it was premature. But any later, and things would have spiraled out of control. And as far as the specific questions Shashi was asking, now remember just earlier this week, the finance minister announced a 1.75 lakh crore stimulus to the economy, most of it aimed at the bottom of the pyramid, involving cash transfers to migrant laborers and the poorest and most needy Indian citizens. Now, I can just go on and give you more statistics, but I think it is much more important to understand that the Prime Minister, in fact, is coordinating with opposition parties. In fact, he's coordinating with all opposition states and all states, including states which are run by opposition parties. And he's not making politics out of it. He is stepping in and doing whatever the union government is asked to do by these states. Now, Shashi may not be aware of this because the central leadership of his party has been just focused on the blame game rather than anything concrete. Many of the suggestions made by state governments of all hues have been implemented. And, the reality is, let me again point you back to that survey where 83% of Indians
Dr. Tharoor,
have expressed confidence in the Prime Minister's leadership, and they don't think that he's letting them down.
The ultimate test lies in the numbers. I'm putting out the trajectory tracker on our screens right now. The Indian curve is shorter. Mercifully, it has a lesser incline than countries like the United States, like countries like Italy, Spain, far more developed with better medical facilities. It's the same virus in different countries. We're seeing different levels of fatality and infection. It can be argued that a part of that credit has to go to the government at a time when Donald Trump has shown how not to lead, at a time when the Brazilian President Bolsonaro is saying, I'll ride out the storm, so what if it's an infection, it's a flu, I'm an athlete. Narendra Modi has understood the depth of the problem and responded to it as only a very competent leader would. Final words, Dr. Tharoor.
Well, first of all, I find it slightly ironic that my friend Jay is quoting the Singapore Prime Minister, whose communication to his people has been a model of exactly what the Indian citizens would have liked to have seen from Prime Minister Modi. You've seen repeatedly, they're going around WhatsApp, the Prime Minister's confident, at the same time reassuring, at the same time fact-filled assurances to his people. That's what we needed here. We haven't got it. Secondly, as I said, I'm willing to take everything that Mr. Jay Panda tells us has been done by the Prime Minister. Why doesn't he tell us himself? Why doesn't he tell the nation what he's doing? Why doesn't he tell the nation what he's thinking? We still don't know. What are the factors that are going to weigh in his mind? As the 21-day lockdown winds down, what's next? He's got to take the nation into confidence. See, these symbolic gestures, the banging of the thalis, the lighting of the lamps are all very well. They're simply not enough. Solidarity is fine. We give you solidarity. We are committed. We are Indians.
Okay.
We're as vulnerable as anybody else in the BJP. The fact still is we're doing our bit. I'm very proud to say that my constituency became the first place to get rapid testing kits delivered right to the hospitals today. And that was done because we're also working very hard, even if it's in the conditions of lockdown, through the internet, by WhatsApp, on the phone, whatever, to get relief to our constituencies.
All right.
So the opposition's also working. Don't knock everything in terms of politics by saying the opposition doesn't cooperate, doesn't support the government. We're saying the government should earn that support by confiding in the nation.
All right.
Take the nation seriously, give us the information, and then we'll happily light lamps as well, but only as a well-informed citizenry and not merely a citizenry dancing to the tune of a photo op.
You may have disagreed on the necessity of lighting lamps, but for lighting up the Newstrack with the power of your arguments, Shashi Tharoor and Panda, thank you for joining us in India Today. Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.